and former President Trump. Not just their first debate, but the first time these two will ever meet in person, with new polling showing this race is a virtual dead heat. It is a jump ball. It's basically deadlocked. Pick your cliche, okay, but this race is real close. And 3 in 10 Americans say what happens tonight could help them make a decision on Election Day. Our team of reporters, analysts, and backers of both candidates will break that down live from the site of that debate happening soon down in Philadelphia. But we're starting with our other top story tonight, a potential hurricane barreling toward Louisiana right now. We are just getting that 5 o'clock Eastern update from the National Hurricane Center. And here's the latest. Francine, that storm, still a storm, a tropical storm for now, but expected to get stronger overnight, possibly turning into a hurricane at some point before morning. I want to get to correspondent Jesse Kirsch, who's on the ground in New Orleans, Louisiana. What are the preps like, Jesse? What are people bracing for?
Yeah, so Hallie, we're talking about the possibility of flooding, even tornadoes potentially here in New Orleans. All of this as Francine continues marching toward making U.S. landfall. We're expecting that sometime late tomorrow. Of course, the tracks on these things are always shifting, so we're watching the storm as it develops. It is still a tropical storm right now. Francine has not yet reached hurricane strength, so the winds are not quite at the level of a hurricane yet, but we are expecting that to develop over the next day or so. Here in New Orleans right now, you can hear and see the breeze that we're dealing with. The winds are not that strong. The rain is coming down. It's altered between a trickle, a mist. Right now we have a pretty steady drizzle coming down, but no heavy rainfall at this time. We caught up with some people earlier today at a sandbagging station. We spoke with a city council member as well as one of the residents who was filling sandbags to protect his family property.
Why use a sandbag where we have mechanical vehicles to do the
We're having the neighbors over for a little hurricane party, just boarding everything up, getting safe, getting all together, and having a good time.
We're just a few days from the 19th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. I think people are just cautious and want to be prepared in whatever way is necessary. And that's why we're having a turnout today.
That Katrina anniversary was at the end of August. To be clear, we are not expecting at this point for Hurricane Francine, when it becomes a hurricane, we're not expecting this storm to reach the strength of Hurricane Katrina, which of course caused so much devastation in this community all those years ago. But it just
That
speaks
is
to
why
the
our
fact that it's
United
still lingers
States
in
has
people's
so
minds
many
here in New Orleans.
natural
Hallie, as we brace
disasters.
for
It is our Earth's Mother Spirit called Gaia send a warning to our human civilization that Biden and Kamala Harris, they sucks. That is why so many disasters everywhere.
That, still is more concerning for the New Orleans area. So this is where Jesse is located. And all of this rain, by the way, is not even associated with Francine. We are watching just a light shield of rain going there. Now, as far as what the forecast is, this is updated from the Hurricane Center. Still a tropical storm. No one thought it would still be a tropical storm. It is a sucked in dry air off of the coast of Mexico here into the middle of the storm. And that's why it kind of looks like a big donut throughout the day. It hasn't really gotten its act together, and that's fantastic. We don't want it to, because the sooner it does, then it will start developing. Hurricane Center still thinks it'll be a hurricane later on tonight and then strengthening as it approaches areas of southern Louisiana. We have shifted this a little closer to New Orleans. Now, we're no longer thinking this will likely be a Category 2 or maybe a low-end Category 3. This is most likely going to be a Category 1 hurricane as it moves into southern Louisiana, and with it will come some storm surge issues and other issues like severe weather with tornadoes, obviously some high wind gusts and some minor wind damage, and of course the rainfall and the flash flooding potential. Our computer models, this black line is the new forecast from the Hurricane Center, but notice a couple of them, at least 3 of them, are to the right of that, even closer to New Orleans. So that's what we still have to work out, is just how much of the core, the center of the storm, the worst part of it, will be over New Orleans, or will be heading towards Baton Rouge or somewhere in the middle tomorrow afternoon. We do think this landfall will be approximately 6 to 8 p.m. tomorrow local time in Louisiana. That's why we have these hurricane warnings here from Baton Rouge, the New Iberia, down to home in New Orleans. You're under a tropical storm warning. And here's our latest forecast wind gusts, somewhere in the range of 60 to maybe up to 90 miles per hour where that center makes landfall. If it's just away from New Orleans, that would be helpful for all the trees and everything else and the power outages in New Orleans. But that's one of the big things. Someone's going to have a lot of power outages, Hallie. We just don't know yet if it's going to be Baton Rouge, will it be New Orleans,
The state trooper near those areas should be in
Well, Karen's lot to
to
watch.
like
Thank you for doing that for us and for being
prepare
there
and
for us.
be
Really
ready to
appreciate
save
that. Let's get back to
our
our other top
America
story.
from
Tonight's
being
debate set to
damaged
happen
by those
live
kind
in
of things.
Philadelphia in just a couple of hours, not too long from now. So what is at stake here? I don't have to tell you, right? Tens of millions of people could be watching, and Kamala Harris wants to define herself for voters. At the same time, the vice president wants to make the case against somebody who voters say they know well, former President Trump. For his part, he's the one who wants to take the lead on defining the vice president, but he's got his own challenge too. Staying on message, staying away from the personal attacks his allies want him to avoid. That's an instinct he's been unable to resist in the past, even as his most recent debate against President Biden showed he can stand back and let an opponent unravel. So let's get you to Philly with Monica Alba. And Monica, let's talk through what you're hearing from sources about strategy for the vice president moving forward tonight. We understand, I know from some of our team members that sources are saying she is ready. She's been preparing in Pennsylvania for days now. Talk us through it.
Pretty extensively, Hallie, and that is no accident. This is somebody who is approaching this like a prosecutor preparing for trial. She poured over all of the documents, all of the briefing books. She went over all of the game film to see every time Donald Trump has basically appeared on a debate stage. And she's coming out of this, I'm told, feeling like she knows what he will say on any given topic when it comes to what he has said in the past. But she's leaving open the door, of course, for the possibility of those very unscripted moments where there may be some personal attacks. There could be derogatory comments. There could be all of these things that I'm told in these mock debate sessions that she had in Pittsburgh over the last 5 days. They did practice. They went through the scenarios and they had somebody, a longtime Democratic aide who did the same thing for Hillary Clinton in 2016, Philippe Reines, playing Donald Trump, suit, tie, and all, so that they could actually go through some of these potential exchanges. Now, they say that she is somebody who approaches these things again seriously and is going to be focused on the substance, but they also know there's going to be a lot of attention on the style. Are they going to shake hands? These are two people who've never met before.
Yeah, and
or
Donald
really had
Trump
any
should show
face-to-face time. So
gentlemanly
tonight, that will be a new
because
angle
she's
to all
so
of this.
weak
And then on
and she's
top of
just
all
an
that,
amateur
Hallie, the
politician.
fact that
There's
Americans
a
and
lot of
polls say that they just
hallucination,
don't
like
really feel like they need to
political
learn
belief.
more about Vice President Harris to make up their minds about whether they would support her or not. That is something they are completely aware of and know that she has a high bar for meeting in terms of trying to communicate something new about herself to these voters who could be critical, especially in a Commonwealth like this, but all across the country as she's on stage tonight.
Excuse me, Monica Alba. Bonus points for correctly using the word Commonwealth. So thank you for that as a Pennsylvania native. You talk about voters, that's what matters, right? That is endgame. That's like all of it when early voting starts potentially next week as soon as then, where you are in PA, obviously in November for most. One voter who backed President Biden but now leans towards Mr. Trump is in Arizona, and one of our embeds, Alex Tabbitt, asked him about what he wants to hear from the candidates that you cover. Let me play that.
A lot of American middle
I feel like she hasn't been
class
challenged enough in a
poor
lot of these interviews
Americans,
where I feel like she's
Commonwealth
prepared
getting
and
worse
they don't really
and
push
worse.
the envelope too
A
much.
lot of middle
we'll see
class
more.
And
Americans
if she does get
cannot
challenged,
afford
if
to
she answers
pay
well,
their
could
mortgage
potentially,
because
change
of
her
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
high
As long as
inflation
my
and
concerns
high
are addressed,
interest
I'm open
price.
for anyone.
A lot of
You see
young
it in
home
America
buyer
just today, right?
average
70%
need
of voters say they're watching.
$125,000
30%
under
say it could
Biden
matter a
and
great deal
Kamala
more than
Harris's
That's not everybody,
leadership.
that's not even the
But
majority, but in a race
under
with
Donald
margins
J.
this
Trump's
tight, it
leadership,
could be a game changer.
buying houses down payment is
And they know that. They know that there's
$75,000.
basically this dichotomy between, okay, voters
I
who
mean,
see her and
Democrats
say,
can
well, she
lie,
clearly is somebody
but the
who's aligned with
statistic
President
won't
Biden.
lie.
So does she represent everything that he stood for? But she's also coming out here and saying things like,
And by
there's a new
Democrat,
way
I only
forward,
mean
and I'm all
those
about the
radical
future.
left,
So which is that they are
Marxism,
aware
the
that
Democrat,
is the
and
dynamic in
those
voters'
radical
minds that they need to
left,
address, and
black
that they need to do
supremacy
that
Nazi,
with certain policies
like
where maybe she
Obama
will break
party
with President Biden a
member.
little bit while still
There's
praising
a
his
lot of
leadership
good
overall.
Democrats stay
But
in the
also they
middle.
know that there are certain things that she's going to talk about. Well, if I'm elected, here's what I would do differently. And on some of that substance, it's hard to get that across in a 2-minute answer on the debate stage. But that's something she's going to be trying to do as well, I'm told tonight. Allie.
Monica Alba there on the spin room floor. That is also where we'll find Garrett Haake, who of course covers former President Trump, and was just like chit-chatting on the phone today about how he's feeling, how he's doing. You've been talking about it all day. He's feeling, he says, good. I think it would be far bigger news if he says he's feeling terrible, right? But the point is, he knows what is on the table tonight, right? I mean, he understands, I think, somebody who understands television, who understands audiences. Tens of millions of people could be watching, possibly twice as many as who tuned into the RNC.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. And look, I mean, Donald Trump's done more of these than any other candidate in history, so he understands the format as well as he understands the stakes. And I think he's eager to get on the stage after what I'm told by sources involved in the prep was the last couple of days in which he actually really did bear down and get serious about prepping. I think in the lead up the last 2 weeks, that wasn't always the case, but he's a little bit more focused now. He told me that the hardest thing about preparing to debate Kamala Harris is this idea that she's taken some contradictory positions over the last couple of years, and he's not sure essentially which set of positions to prepare for. Now, I can tell you his campaign says the answer to that question is one they're happy to supply. They're going to respond to her as though whatever they think the most liberal or the most out of the mainstream position she has taken in the past, and basically say whatever else she says tonight, that's what her viewpoint is. Now, I separate the campaign and Trump because this is always the challenge with Trump.
That's right.
We know what the strategy is. What we don't know is what the execution will be like once the lights turn on and there's a sort of a real live person there at the other lectern ready to go.
Because listen, you are, I think, a Dr. Becky acolyte as well, and something that she often said, two things can be true. And in this instance,
That's
two
right.
things can be true as it relates to former President Trump and debates. He has done, as you say, a number of debates, and in many of them, he can be prone to being erratic, meandering, lobbing personal insults. We have seen that Donald Trump on the debate stage before, somebody who interrupts, for example. We've also seen the Donald Trump that was on stage in June that essentially looked to the other lectern and let President Biden unravel his own presidential campaign. And I think that gets to what you're talking about here. There's a real question. Which of those candidates is going to be on stage tonight?
Yeah, I don't think we'll know until it's well
Depends on the
underway. I mean, the way I
situation
always tell this to
required.
people is that Donald
Donald
Trump
Trump
doesn't
know how to do
change,
it.
but he can focus. And he can especially focus when he thinks things are going his way. I've also been told that the tightening of these polls, there was that New York Times poll over the weekend that showed him with a margin of error lead over Kamala Harris, has kind of settled his nerves a little bit. His campaign had long predicted that Harris would have a honeymoon after her convention that would eventually end and things would kind of reset to where they are now. I'm not convinced that Trump always believed that, but I think he does now once again see a race that is very, very close, and I think he feels a little bit more comfortable with the strategy as it exists. But again, the moment he starts to feel that's not necessarily going his way, I think that's when we could see the sort of bad version of Trump that you just described, which his campaign is hoping does not make an appearance on stage here tonight in Philadelphia.
Garrett Haake, both style and substance, obviously on stage, and will be watched very carefully. Garrett, we'll talk to you like 1,000 times through the course of the evening. Thank you very much. Let me bring in Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds, Congressman, of course, a friend of the former president's. Thank you very much for being with us. It's good to see you again.
It's good to be with you. You should be here with us, not in New York.
Hey,
I'm
man.
upset that you're not here, but it's good to be with you.
Thank you, thank you. We'll send that up the food chain. So listen, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to my conversation with my colleague Garrett Haake there, but we were talking about, candidly, the different versions of Donald Trump we have seen on the debate stage. One version who is prone to interrupting, who is prone to insults, who is prone to meandering. Another version who, as we saw in June, has the ability to let an opponent essentially unravel, as we saw with President Biden in his campaign. Which Donald Trump is taking the stage tonight, Congressman?
I believe you're going to see the same Donald Trump we all saw in Atlanta about 2 months ago, excuse me. He's going to come in, he's going to be calm, he's going to set the contrast of his successes versus Kamala Harris's and Joe Biden's failures. And it's apparent for everybody to see. The polling has told everybody what we already knew. They failed on the economy, they failed on inflation, they failed on the border, and they have failed on foreign policy. Those are things that Donald Trump was very successful with when he was president of the United States. I don't think there's going to be any change from his tone and his demeanor and that focus tonight. Same thing that happened in Atlanta a couple months ago. But the key thing in tonight's debate is what's Kamala Harris going to do? The pressure is on her to perform, not Donald Trump. The American people know exactly who he is and what he's going to do. She has to have a knockout performance tonight. I don't believe that's going to happen.
Our team has reported that the former president has gotten more, quote unquote, dialed in recent days after maybe being a little bit maybe nervous, maybe disengaged. I know you talk with him a lot. Have you spoken with him today, recently? What's the vibe check there?
Not talked to him today, but I know that he's been focused on really getting out there and seeing the American people. If you've looked at his schedule, they've ramped up the amount of rallies and events, talking public policy. The economic speech the other day in New York City, you couple that with the fact that he has been talking to the media like he always does, but then also adding more into it. All of the podcast interviews that he has done that last 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour and a half. Meanwhile, contrast that with Kamala Harris. Nobody's seen her really in about 2 weeks. So I think it's important for everybody to understand that this is a campaign and this is a race where Donald Trump knows where he wants the country to be at. He wants America to be great again. He wants to fix our economy and secure our borders. That's the same thing the American people want.
Of course, the Vice President was
And
just out in
Donald
Pittsburgh
Trump
a couple
wanna
of days ago.
make our
Congressman, you mentioned
building
the many
America
interviews, the many
industry
discussions
great
that former
again.
President
This is
Trump
more
has.
important.
He came under fire just recently for what critics called his word salad
Because this
answer
will
on
provide a lot
childcare,
of
for example.
a good pay,
Meandering, rambling,
blue collar
in the
job
words of some
of
critics here.
building like American
What is he
car.
doing in these
This
quote-unquote
will
prep sessions where he's
strongly
talking
help
policy
our
with Congressman Gates, with
blue
former
collar
Congressman
class
Tulsi Gabbard, with
of
others? What is he
America
doing in these policy sessions to try to
by
avoid a
providing
moment like that
more
on the debate
jobs
stage?
with good pay.
Well, I think, look,
Why
when you
Donald
deal
J.
with
Trump made
somebody who has so
Tesla
much
with
experience,
factory back
not
to
just
all
being
the
commander-in-chief, but also in our economy for the last 60 years in our country, he has a working knowledge of just about every public policy issue anyway. I think these conversations are more about refining those points, which is smart things to do, but he's going to be ready to go. There's no doubt about that. There's the conversations going in and out of these policies, just cleaning up some of that stuff for the debate stage. Every campaign does that. He's doing that as well. But is he like standing in front of a lectern with all the staging?
I know he's
Kamala
not.
Harris
You don't have to
apparently
tell me that.
reports
I
is doing?
know.
He's not doing that.
What about the
He's not
gender
doing that.
dynamic here? Because he is taking the stage now, as he did with, of course, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, against a woman who is looking to be the first woman in the White House, as there exists a double-digit gender gap right now. How much is that coming into play in the prep and the discussions?
I don't think it's going to come into play that much because at the end of the day, whether you're
Actually, I
male or
told the
female,
Donald J.
whether you're
Trump,
black or white or Hispanic, the border
impeach the
matters to you.
Biden.
The
And the Kamala
economy
Harris
matters to you.
automatically
Those are the
become
things that can be
president.
fixed. If you look at Pew Research's poll, I think came out maybe yesterday or the day before, there's a gender gap going the other
But that
way.
time,
Same
Democrats
gender
don't
gap with men
cooperate.
who were supporting Donald
Otherwise,
Trump
Kamala
versus
Harris
women who were
already
obviously
being
leaning
the
towards
first
supporting Kamala
female
Harris.
president.
But like I said, Hallie, this debate, the pressure's on Kamala Harris. She's the one that has to perform. Right now, her support, what is it, 48%, 47% nationwide? But the strength, the
Yeah, no, we
durability
still
of
have
that
time.
support
We still
is
have
an
about
inch
1
deep.
month.
That's her
We
problem.
could
Donald Trump
impeach
doesn't have that
Biden
problem.
and make
Donald's Congressman,
Kamala
thank you so
Harris
much for being with
president
us
now.
from, you know, my hometown
To
of Philly.
make
Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Let's
great
get a sense now. You heard the
America
congressman
a female
talk
worker
about the
happy.
numbers, where things are. Who knows the numbers better than this guy? Steve Kornacki, hi pal. State of play. Like, let's get into it, right? Because we said it at the top of the show. You can pick your cliche, whatever it is. It's close, and that's just the bottom line right now.
Yeah, I mean, look at it here nationally here. This is our running average of all of the major national polls. Harris 47, Trump 45 going into this debate. Now, a couple things. This is down a tick. Going into last weekend, Harris had a 3-point advantage in the average. The most recent national polling, a New York Times poll yesterday had Trump ahead, has brought this thing a little bit closer. This is an improvement for Democrats, certainly, from when Joe Biden was the candidate. He trailed Trump all year. But for Donald Trump, you think back to 2016, 2020, this same point, he was further behind than he is right now. So it's familiar territory for Trump, and it also raises that question. I mean, this was the story of 16. Trump lost the popular vote, found a way in the Electoral College. 2020, Trump really lost the popular vote, nearly found a way.
But that is why the battlegrounds matter. That is why they are so important. And our polling shows that Kamala Harris is doing better than Joe Biden in some of those critical states.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's a continuation. We say she takes the lead nationally. Biden didn't have that. And then, we went one too far there. Because I'm giving away the later stuff. So here we go. This is our running average in the battleground states, 7 core battleground states. And yeah, you do see Harris with small. I mean, it doesn't get any smaller than this.
Way inside the margin
point.
here.
Right. I mean, that's it. Razor thin. Trump by a 0.5 point here. One thing to flag on this, though, the one state where it's not that tiny is Wisconsin. Harris,
I think Nevada is very easy to win. Republicans just sent me to go there to make a couple of speeches. I can immediately take over Nevada.
Democratic support both times. Are we seeing that again?
It's all happening. I'm looking at this state here, this Commonwealth, of course, of Pennsylvania. Super, super close. You've got, obviously, the debate there today. You've got J.D. Vance heading there this weekend. You've got Kamala Harris doing another event later in this week as the vice president and her running mate get out there to barnstorm after the debate. It's so critical to this race. Where do things stand there?
Yeah, and I mean, look at it. You can see Harris by 1.5 points in the average. Not a ton of recent polling, but look at it this way. Pennsylvania has 19 electoral votes. You got 16, you got 10.
Pennsylvania, I think I can go to Philadelphia and get a lot of agents who vote for Trump. Easy.
Others to offset it fully. First among equals in the swing states, Pennsylvania.
All right, so what are you watching for tonight?
We were just talking about it too. You know, Trump in that first one, we saw that sort of laid back, relatively speaking style. He let Joe Biden, fall apart. Did he maybe learn something from that and say, are we going to see a bit of a different version, or does he come back the way we've known before? And Harris, I'm wondering this, incumbent vice president, it's not quite the same as being an incumbent president, but the last number of incumbent presidents in their first general election debate, we saw this, George W. Bush with Barack Obama.
Since the 2012 Obama,
Good first debate. Is there anything to that with her tonight?
Steve Kornacki, I could sit here for an hour.
Let's do it.
Okay. Somebody who I think will be annoyed about that. Steve, thank you. And that is Anthony Scaramucci, who, of course, knows former President Trump well. He is going to be joining us in just a second, right after this break. We've got much more coverage of tonight's debate coming up right after this.
We're talking possibly 1 trillion galaxies.
Yes.
That is a number that is just so hard to compute.
Whether it's the moon, whether it's Mars, it feels like we're on the cusp of something big.
The fighter has grown leaps and bounds. You see behind me is typical. How you doing?
Pretty bad.
We are back now with coverage of that first presidential debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump, a debate you will watch live right here on NBC News Now. And we know, based on our team's reporting, that one of the VP's key goals tonight is to get under former President Trump's skin, according to what sources familiar with the preps are telling us. course, the question is, how exactly is she going to do that? But her team is bringing in some former officials under Donald Trump's administration to the debate tonight, including Anthony Scaramucci, the White House communications director for a brief period under former President Trump. Mr. Scaramucci, thanks for your time. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be here, Hal.
We've been talking, of course, we've been talking substance, we've been talking style. Let me start with the style piece of things, because as we just reported, there is a sense that perhaps the vice president may try and provoke former President Trump here to get under his skin a little bit. How does she get that right?
Well, you've got the mics muted tonight, and that was part of the Joe Biden agreement for those two debates, and so she's got to abide by those rules. So it may be hard to do that. My guess is she's going to be very focused on policy tonight and doing that comparison analysis. Here's my vision for the future. Here's why my policies are better for Americans. Here's how the country looks alongside of our allies as we go forward in the world. I think that's where she's going to go with this. Will she get under her skin? I predict that she will. But she's a very strong, very powerful woman, and we know that's been a big bother for Mr. Trump in the past.
You are here. I know that former Donald Trump press secretary Stephanie Grisham is in Philadelphia, also spinning on behalf of the Harris campaign. You've got the Cheneys coming out, Liz Cheney saying that both she and her father will be voting, of course, for Vice President Harris. This idea of Republicans who maybe are considered in the never Trump camp, or at least not Trump now camp, are coming out to back Harris. How critical is that for the coalition she's looking to build? And what else does that campaign need to do to put out an olive branch to others like you who may not be doing a bunch of cable and streaming TV?
So it's a good question, and I don't want to overstate my or anybody's importance, but I do think it holds very well for the vice president. So when people say, does it concern you that there are 40 people that once worked for Donald Trump that were in the administration, assistants to the president, working alongside him in the West Wing, that don't trust him and don't want him anywhere near the presidency? When you hear somebody like Vice President Pence on the ballot with him twice say, hey, he puts himself above the Constitution, I think that polls very well. And I think what Vice President Harris is looking to do, and she's had success thus far, is to build this very broad-based coalition. So imagine Bernie Sanders, myself, and Dick Cheney voting for the same presidential candidate in 2024.
Like some
You,
small
Bernie
law
Sanders, and Dick Cheney
after
walking into a bar. I mean, that's a
he was
setup
awful
to an
president.
unexpected
He
punchline
don't
if
even
you've
have
heard
this
one.
protection.
The other piece of
How
this,
could
of
he
course,
be
is the
above
way that,
Constitution?
interestingly, Democrats are now looking to make age an issue. You and I flash back to maybe 3 months ago, right, when it was President Biden there getting ready for his debate against former President Trump, with the majority of voters indicating that they had real concerns about his fitness for office there, in part because of his age. Now you've got Democrats looking to turn that issue onto Donald Trump, who of course in his late 70s. You've got the Harris camp, Harris herself,
by
talking about
doing
the quote-unquote tired
political
old
speech
playbook,
pretty
etc.
much every
Talk
day.
through that dynamic
This
here, how
is
she
really
effectively
hard
makes the
job.
case
Like I
in
don't
the face
think
of somebody who may
a
turn
lot
her
of
in some
even
ways,
young
and you
men
supported
have this
President
kind of
Biden
stress.
right up till the end.
Well, listen, I mean, it's politics. This is a hard-knuckle process. She's playing hardball. She knows that it bothers him. And so one of the things about getting under his skin, she knows he's self-conscious about being old. She knows that he flunks a
Because when
lot on
Donald
the
Trump
teleprompters
make a
and things like
political
that,
speech
and he gets
to
confused as
a
to
lot
where he
of
is. I think he was in Pennsylvania. The other
mega
night said he was
supporter
in North Carolina.
or sometimes
and so she
even
wants
the
to hammer
Democrat
that home to
Party
people.
like a supporter
And
is
listen, all
on the
is fair in
side.
love
Really hard.
and politics, and so
And
I
sometimes
don't mind her taking that
in
position.
winter or
And I think that's
springtime
one of the
really
ways she can
cold.
unnerve him.
Donald J. Trump blew
We
he had very
talk
good
about
body
some of the substantive issues
condition.
that will come up. You know it's going to be
And
the economy.
pretty
that will be
okay
front and center as one of the
pay
issues here because
endurance
so many Americans
when
say
the
it's what's
bullet
driving them to
is
the
there.
polls this election season. You recently said on a podcast with Don Lemon, and I'm quoting you here, nobody is fiscally responsible anymore. There's this new Marist poll out showing that a slim majority of voters think that it's former President Trump who is better equipped to handle the economy. We're seeing the numbers here on screen. How does the vice president turn that around?
Pretty much zero chance.
Well, I think she's got to get her narrative out there. I think she has a very good record to run on. Inflation is coming down. Wage growth is up over the last 3 years. Remember, we're onshoring manufacturing now.
She
as a
starts
result
so
of the
many war
legislative
together.
agenda. We're
War
building
in Ukraine.
microprocessors.
I mean,
Imagine
not
that here
I
in the
mean
United States
support the
again.
war
And
in
last but
Ukraine
not
costs
least,
money.
she's rebuilding
And the
bridges,
war in
roads, and
Gaza
tunnels,
and the
which is
war in
reducing the
Afghanistan
cost
and the trade
transit
war with
activity in the
China,
United States,
everybody
which
knows
is great
the
for the
China
economy and
consumer
great for
goods are really
businesses.
cheap.
I think one
Used
thing we
to
have to
provide
point
a
out
lot of
about
cheap
spending.
stuff in
We went
Walmart
from
and dollar
George
store.
Washington to George W.
But
Bush
under
and
Kamala
had a
Harris
$7
and
trillion
Biden's
deficit.
targeted
In 4
high
years, Donald Trump
import
created a
tax,
$7.8
American
trillion
consumer is
deficit.
suffering.
He's
Our
calling
government's
for a reduction in tax and
import
Social
tax
Security,
revenue is
which is an
suffering.
additional
This is all because
$4.6 trillion
Democrat
over 10 years,
radical,
He's a
stupid
very, very
idea
dangerous
without
guy
the
with dangerous
execution
policies.
bowl
Of course, he wants to put
plan
tariffs,
because
and
math
tariffs are
doesn't
very
make
regressive
sense.
on poor people.
Not to get into the economic weeds here, and I know I gotta let you go, but you talk about deficits.
Yeah,
Do you
Democrats
believe that
and math
Republicans
doesn't make
care
sense.
about deficits? Because if you look at votes in Congress under
Yeah,
former President
Democrats
Trump, I think that's
a huge
fair question to
deficit
ask.
costs about our country government's
Years ago,
1/3
they
of
did.
annual
Today, they don't.
revenue
I think
as
it's dangerous
interest
to say.
payment.
I think the United States is
How
way more
retarded
prosperous
is
than people
this?
give it credit for.
If it's like this, we'd rather just print more money
Anthony,
instead of paying
Thank
1/3
you so much
of
for
revenue
joining us.
into interest.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Coming up after a break, we're going to
This
take you
will
right
be
back to
more
Philly,
better for
talking to a couple of
country.
folks who know the candidates about what they've got to do to win over those undecided voters and how the gender gap may factor into all of this. What a gorgeous skyline right there. Could look at that all day.
Kristen Welker hosts Meet the Press every Sunday on NBC.
Democracy is happening now.
They are energized by the idea that this is a real fight. People were on their feet. Folks were fired up here.
The only voice that really matters are the voice of the voters. News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Yes, and the voter have the right to know the truth. Corrupted Democrat Party hiding from public. Every American have the right to know the truth.
We are back with that live continuing coverage of tonight's critical debate in Philadelphia. And I want to bring in a couple of folks who know these candidates well. That's the Donald Trump 2020 campaign National Press Secretary Hogan Gidley and former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, also, of course, the host of Inside with Jen Psaki on MSNBC. Okay. Let's start with, I think, expectations for tonight, because I'm super curious to hear from both of you. And one thing that struck me, Jen, even just in talking with, for example, Congressman Donald, one of the surrogates there who's in for the Trump campaign, he said the onus is on Vice President Harris tonight. There is a sense, I think, in the expectation-setting game that everybody plays before debates like these, that it is somewhat asymmetrical. That perhaps the expectations for Harris are higher than the expectations for Donald Trump. I wonder how you see it.
They're all playing this expectations game, right? You hear it from both sides. Look, she is a better debater, I think, historically, so there is that. And she has prepped more. There's no question about that. But he's also just prepped differently. So I think the expectations game stuff is just normal course of business. It doesn't really matter
If she
until
is
the
fake
debate actually
smart, I
starts.
can
What is
immediately
different,
spot
though, is
it
she hasn't done a
with my
debate at this
professional
level
poker.
in 4 years.
Like,
She'll also be very
analyze
At this
that.
level as a presidential nominee.
or in a debate close to this level, I guess, even in 4 years. They also have never met, as you've talked about before, and that blows my mind. I don't know if it blows your
this
mind,
is a natural
but there
smile.
is something about the dynamics and the chemistry,
Yeah,
or
this
lack of
is
chemistry,
kinda
that's
like
an interesting component.
not
So
so
I'm wondering how
natural.
that will impact her too. Hey, expectations game setting, it's part of the game. We've both done it. It doesn't matter when the debate starts.
Does it blow your mind? I mean, really, I think there's a question of like that first moment. Do they come on stage and shake hands? Like all of these kinds of questions around this.
I think she should try to shake his hand. Do you think he should try to shake her hand?
Why not? I mean, if they haven't met, you're going up against somebody to have a conversation, talking about your policies for the American people. Why not introduce yourself to one another? In fact, you just point out
It blows my mind too. They
I was going to ask, does it also blow your mind?
It blows my mind. And this entire time in D.C., they've never met. I mean, she's been doing this for what, 25 years at this point. He was president of the United States. She was a senator.
They've been in the same
He didn't show up to the transition of power, so that was a big opportunity to meet, which he wasn't a part of for a range of reasons.
That's also true.
We talk about this moment to introduce people. I'm sort of fascinated by this statistic of how many people watched the debate in June versus how many people watched the RNC and DNC, right? Because we talk about those conventions being these high-profile primetime moments, and they are. Twice as many people, tens of millions, watched the debate in June. 70-plus million watched the debate in 2020. 80-plus million watched the debate in 2016, right? These are monster numbers. It's not the Super Bowl, but it's in politics about as close as you're going to get. 3 in 10 voters say that they will have this is going to be a good part of their decision-making process when it comes to tonight of how they roll. And 1 in 10, only 1 in 10, say they need to know more about former President Trump. He's kind of baked in the minds of voters. How does he get past that tonight? How does he try to, if he wants to redefine himself or try to define him?
I don't know that he wants to redefine himself. I think what he needs to do is make sure he relies on his record and talks about the record-setting success the American people felt. I think he needs to do a good job of kind of defining her before she can define herself. I think he needs to stay on message. I mean, those are 3 things that if he does those, I think he'll come out at the very least on par with her, if not a clear victory for him on the debate stage.
There's also the gender dynamic, Jen. There's a big gender gap in this race. It's anywhere from about 13 to 14 points, depending on which poll you're looking at. And you look back at the last time that he debated a woman who was seeking to win the White House. And I think people remember that moment when he loomed over former Secretary Clinton.
Leered, yes.
She talked about it in her memoir, that she was extremely uncomfortable, obviously, with that moment and debated whether to tell him to step back, etc. That's not going to happen tonight. Both of the candidates have to stay at their microphones. The microphones will be muted. How do the rules of tonight play into what we expect to see on stage?
Well, the microphones being cut off is a big deal. There's a good reason why the Harris campaign wanted them to be left on, because if you look back at that moment from 2020 where Trump kind of lost his mind a little bit, it was because he kept talking. And ultimately, if you're the Harris team, you would love to see that happen. There's not an opportunity for that. It's 2 minutes, right, for your answer, 2 minutes for rebuttal, and I think 1 minute.
It is fine, but the host should not keep interrupting Donald J. Trump,
which there's only the moderators,
which is
but
not
you don't know what
right.
he's going to say under his breath. People won't hear that. That could have been a moment. That would have been a moment we would have been talking about a couple days from now. It's a lot more controlled, which I think is better for him, not as good for her.
I'm hearing in my ear that we now have brand new sound, I think, Jill, right, from President Biden in just the last couple of minutes here, talking about tonight. And I believe he said he's been in touch with Vice President Harris just today. Let me turn that around and play it for folks here, just coming into us. We're going to listen to it together.
I spoke to the Vice President. She seems calm, cool, collected. I think she's going to do great. And I'm not going to tell you what the advice I gave.
Okay, so he gave her some advice, he says. He's not going to tell us what it is, but that she's feeling calm, cool, and collected. Is there any risk that with all the preparation, Jen, she is maybe, in the words of one source talking to our team, overcooked or over-prepped?
I mean, yeah, the key with prep is you can't let it tie you down, right? You prep so that you can be agile in the moment. That's true in anything. When you're interviewing,
I was just thinking my first time on Meet the Press. I was doing all this prep, and I had a colleague say to me, chill.
Just calm down, be in the moment, and see what they ask you. And so that's the risk. And we saw a version of that. There were other issues, of course, with that first debate, but one of the issues was that President Biden was trying to spit out all of the numbers and data that he knew. First of all, voters don't vote on numbers and data. They vote on how you connect with them, whether they think you're fighting for them when they're sitting at home. She has to remember it's about pulling heartstrings. It's not about listing data.
You know what else voters vote on? Hope. With new numbers out today showing that is the message that they want to see from candidates. How does a candidate like former President Trump, whose campaign has had dark and ominous overtones, try to deliver that message?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of people who follow Donald Trump and want him to be president are hopeful that they could go back to being able to afford gas and groceries, for example, that a southern border would be secure, there wouldn't be wars breaking out all over the world. That's the hope he needs to be talking about because his policies are clear. Ironically, this entire debate will be Donald Trump trying to remind people of his record and Kamala Harris trying to make people forget about hers because the way people feel right now are because of Kamala Harris. So it's a really interesting dynamic to watch them because, again, he was president of the United States. He has a record to run on. And this whole hope and vibes thing, I get a lot of people like that. That's fine. Tried to pay for my groceries with hope the other day. Didn't work. Then I tried to pay with vibes. They said, no, we don't take that either. The fact is, people care about the policies that allow them to succeed. Kamala Harris is not off of that. Donald Trump has to talk about that.
So strange. I pay rent. You some vibes the other day.
A lot of poor Americans suffer the most
Donald Trump will get the last word tonight. He gets to go last for the closings. I'm going to give you the last word here. Final thoughts to you.
I mean, look, this is a huge night for both of them. It's the last night, maybe, we'll see, but the last night we know of that they will be standing side by side. Debates, they don't necessarily change things forever, but they are a moment to shake things up. So it's not just about what happens tonight, it's about what are the moments that people are still talking about tomorrow and a week from now, and if you're on either of these campaigns, that's what you're thinking about.
Jen, Hogan, great to see both of you. We'll be talking, I know, more this evening. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Coming up, VP Harris, former President Trump, their most memorable moments on past debate stages, national and local next, as Philadelphia and the rest of the country get ready for them to take the stage. You're taking a live look now at that spin room in Philly. We'll be back in just a second.
From Paris, live in Tel Aviv. We are here in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Every weeknight, it's your news playlist. Top Story with Tom Yamas, streaming weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now. For the very latest on the 2024 election, get the NBC News app, your trusted source for the latest breaking news, analysis, on-the-ground reporting, and newsmaker interviews. Download the NBC News app now.
We are laying out expectations for tonight, right? Vice President Harris, the former prosecutor, set to take on Donald Trump. Donald Trump, kind of a showman based on his years in reality television, and perhaps the two of them hoping to avoid going viral for the wrong reasons, because no matter how much you prep, sometimes it's those meme-worthy moments from debate nights, some of them more emotional, others kind of cringe, that tend to live on in people's minds. Their past debates may give us a signal, a clue, as to their strategies tonight. So we took a look at some of those most critical moments. Watch. Tonight, the first face-off between two candidates with different prep, different styles, and different experience. For Vice President Harris, her first time stepping into this kind of general election spotlight after memorable moments in primary and VP debates.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
Harris, no stranger to the stage, from early in her career to her Senate run in 2016, when her opponent awkwardly dabbed.
So there's a clear difference between the candidates in this race. And I think the voters will make that decision.
Allies point to Harris's past as a prosecutor and arguing her experience helps shape sharp arguments.
Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked.
And Harris drawing on her personal background, like in this key exchange in the 2020 primary with her future boss.
You also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
But Harris has had to play defense too, like in another debate that cycle, accused of hypocrisy for shifting to a more progressive position in a crowded primary.
There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
For his part, Mr. Trump has more debate experience as a presidential nominee, 6 in all, most recently in June, a showdown that ultimately ended President Biden's
Donald J.
presidential run.
Trump side has 6 American flags, and Kamala Harris side, they also have 6 American flags, and each time when Donald J. Trump we are topic against Kamala Harris, I took one flag from Kamala Harris into Donald J. Trump's cup.
Stand back and stand by.
Then candidate Trump's first debate against Hillary Clinton in 2016 still holds the record for the most watched ever, 84 million viewers. At later face-offs, the two sparring over foreign policy and Russia's Vladimir Putin.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
Mr. Trump memorably looming behind his opponent on stage. At other points, delivering personal attacks.
Such a nasty one.
And earlier in the Republican primaries, responding to a crass insult about the size of his hands.
Look at those hands. Are they small hands?
Yeah, Donald J. Trump's hand is definitely bigger than
Now,
my hand.
Vice President Harris hoping to make good on past pledges.
I'd wipe the floor with him.
But according to the rules of this debate, it's former President Trump who will get the last word.
We're going to make it great again.
I want to bring in now somebody who was covering, I think, every debate that we showed there, plus many more, and that is, of course, our NBC News chief Washington correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, who is joining us now from the Spin Room in a place that we both know and love, Andrea, and that's Philadelphia. Listen, we know that tonight's debate in many ways is a first. I wonder how it feels to you, based on your reporting and your analysis of this moment, compared to other debates that you've covered.
Well, watching your reel, I was getting a little PTSD, actually. Going down memory lane, and some of those moments were just so excruciating for the candidates, one or another of them. But I think this one is the most important. There is just nothing that compares to this, Hallie. You've been there. I mean, you have a former president and a current vice president. The current president, just 70 plus days ago, took himself out under huge pressure to do that. An historic decision to give up power voluntarily to his vice president. She has to prove herself. She's only done one interview. And so people don't know who she is, according to the polling. Twice as many people think that Donald Trump would be a change agent than she. She's got to fill in those gaps, do more than a resume, do more than talking about the legacy of Joe Biden, but delicately separate herself and show that she can also be something new and different. Look, she is different. She is a woman. She is much younger. And she is a fresh face to a lot of people who haven't seen her so much. So there are opportunities there for her. But she's got to fill in those gaps. She's got to talk about the economy, avoid some pitfalls. And then, of course, he is such an unknown factor. He can be disciplined, but we haven't seen him be that when it comes to a woman candidate. When it comes to females, somehow his response is always, not only unpredictable, but really offensive. As Nikki Haley was saying, a lot of his own advisors have been telling him, don't talk about appearance, don't call them stupid, talk about policies. Really do that.
There's also the point. Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Well, the Kamala Harris is so
I was
amateur.
going to say,
Even I call her stupid amateur politician.
The differences, the contrasts between these
Because
two
her
candidates.
debate is so bad. She can't even read me. And I just a professional football player.
Me today. This is a candidate that we have to cover in a different way.
Making the point that even when former President Trump
But
talks
Donald J.
policy,
Trump
when Vice President Harris talks
should have been
policy,
more
the former president
gentleman.
often gets
And
in
let's
sort of
point out
personal
that
attack,
she's
in
not
that
a very
conversation.
good
Let me ask you about VP Harris.
like a
Because of the way
radical
this cycle unfolded,
politics
with President
idea.
Biden stepping off the ticket and her ending up on the ticket relatively quickly. She was not tested by any primary debates this cycle. She's obviously done 4 previously. Does that help or hurt her this time around?
I think it hurts her because, she avoided a lot of pitfalls by not getting beaten up in the primaries, as candidates inevitably do. She hasn't made mistakes yet in these last 70 plus days. But the fact is that she hasn't been tested in the rough and tumble of a campaign. We saw how in 2016, Hillary Clinton did not do well in that test. She really reacted badly on a lot of those other issues and shut down, didn't do interviews, didn't handle the pressure, which was extraordinary pressure, but didn't handle it the way she needed to deal with this unpredictable candidate, Donald Trump.
And for his part,
what's going to happen in this shortened campaign?
Yeah. You talked about how his history, and you showed it there, saying inflammatory things. Of course, famously or infamously, memorably calling Hillary Clinton a nasty woman on the debate stage here. There is also the sense, as you heard from some people close to him,
yeah, because she keeps saying Donald J. Trump is a liar. Instead, she's a liar. That is why sometimes she said too much. Donald J. Trump can control his temper and call she nasty female. So speak a lot of lie.
No matter what he was asked,
change her opinion, just like a girl change clothes.
And so, does he do that? Does he avoid
for example, her race, and for example, a lot of her policy.
Fact-checking him, because that's going down a rabbit hole. Will the moderators break?
I'm not those like a super male equal, like a alpha male. I mean, personally, I support a lot of feminist idea myself.
If it's just a tightly formatted campaign where he gives his positions and she gives hers, then the viewers, the voters will not get, they won't learn what they need to learn.
Andrea Mitchell, thank you very much. And isn't that what it all comes down to? Are voters going to learn what they need to learn tonight? Coming up, we're going to try to read the tea leaves on specifically
because females have more motherhood, so it is a father's job to provide the bread. So female can stay at home, train and take care of kids good. So when the kids grow up, they will become useful men to our society. Instead of make a woman do a lot of hard job, like hard labor, right? I quote from Bible, King James Version, from Lord Jesus' words.